Yep.
Then you can tell me all about it. So you said there was a new one just a couple hours ago?
Yeah, Vaishav got 46.06, beating the old world record by 1 second.
Hmm. So what's the time now?
It's 46.06.
46.
So we're getting very close to the 46-minute barrier.
Man. So this is your spreadsheet that we're working with, right? The I believe. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about,
Um,
but
Is
so
it about the... Oh, yeah, it's the world record progression one. Yeah, Krypton and I worked on that separately, actually, and we later found out we were both working on getting the world record progression, and then we combined our findings.
oh, nice. Yeah, I was gonna ask, because I don't have a whole lot of like direct links to a lot of this stuff. So I was curious how you guys found all of this.
Yeah, so I basically used most of the findings that Krypton had previously used for the Donkey Kong Country 2 world record progression, and that included old Japanese leaderboards and just searching on Nico Video, because back in the day it was mostly the Japanese people that ran it before the American and European community really picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
So through Nico Video, for example, we found the video of Hotarubi, and on Twitter I contacted Hotarubi to ask him if he remembers any more times that he said back in the day, and that's also how we got some of the times.
Ah, okay. That's good. Okay. All right. And this is kind of a touchy subject, and we can cut this out of the recording if you need to, or if we want to. But uh, so after Sui, right? Is that how you say it?
Yes,
Sui
Sui.
Mind. After Sui, well, there's some more records that are done, and that era is it's kind of jumbled up because there is a world record by Leftover, but Leftover doesn't want that run to be out there. So it's
Oh,
like the world record's fallen to someone else. Or can you explain that to me a little more?
yeah, so Leftover, he has always been very much against leaderboards from what I gathered. The communication has been a bit limited because of language barriers on both sides, but
Right.
from what we gathered, he just really dislikes being ranked, and it also created some bad blood in time.
Hmm.
And as such, we still decided to take it into account because it is a part of the history, but on he would never post his runs to the official leaderboards, and it looks like that discussion has pretty much caused most of the Japanese community to not post their times to speedrun.com anymore, so that's very unfortunate. And actually,
Hmm.
I should probably also mention the spreadsheet that is on the wiki has not been updated with the last two records, including the one that was set just today. There was also a 4607 by Blue Pen. I think I linked it somewhere in the Discord.
Okay. Yeah, we'll need to get that up to date because yeah, the one I'm working with is not up to
Yeah.
date for that. But
Okay.
that's all
Yeah.
right. We'll get that up to speed. Um in your estimation, do you think it'd be okay to talk about Leftover at
Yeah.
all?
I think it is just a part of the history, so it would also not be good to skip over it. Maybe we can keep it a little bit shorter than the other records, and
Mm,
but it did beat the longest standing record, so it's very hard to leave it out, I think.
hmm. Yeah, I mean it's a big one. The fact
Yeah.
that he just beat Sui by like 9 seconds, out of nowhere.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And a story that's also surrounding that is that Sui back in the day, he really jumped very far ahead of everyone else because he did a trick that no one else dared do at the time called Test Chaos. Chaos is the boss of the fourth world of the game, Mechanos.
mhm.
And the classic way would be to just fight him pretty casually. We did a damage boost to skip one of the cycles, but that was it. But Sui, he decided to test chaos, which involves doing several 2-1 jumps to do the fight much faster. And 2-1 jumps are double frame perfect tricks, so it was not deemed to be RTA viable until Sui started doing it, and now most of the Japanese runners are maining that. But the crazy thing about Leftover's world record was that he did not go for test chaos. He had found a different way to beat chaos that did not involve any 2-1 jumps.
Mm.
And it was slower, but with improved movement, he was still able to beat Sui by 9 seconds, despite going for a slower boss fight in World 4.
Man. Now, you said it with better movement. Is that like just like a lot of movement over all the stages, or is that any particular ones that stand out? Or
Yeah, Leftover is just crazy consistent. There was one notable mistake in 6-1, but other than that, the run was extremely clean. And he also started implementing a new route through the later half of World 6 and 7, which comes down to Kong management, and it makes Creepy Caverns and Lightning Lookout in World 7 a lot harder, but it does save a few seconds overall. So that's the big routing difference. And other than that, it was just optimization, not making mistakes. It was a very impressive run for sure.
yeah, real quick, you said it was the later half of World 6, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
normally in 6-5 Ropey Rumpus, we would get a second Kong and then do a swap at the start of Barbos. And that way we would start World 7 with Solo Dixie, and then we carried Solo Dixie until late in 7-2. But the new route involves entering exiting World 6 with 2 Kongs and then doing 7-2 with Kitty instead of Dixie and 7-3 with Dixie instead of Kitty. Probably sounds a bit vague like this, but it's
I'll
one of
watch
the
it more and
newer.
I'll get a better idea.
Yeah.
Is anybody else doing that, or is it mainly just Leftover?
No, I think most runners have picked it up since then. I was the first one of the non-Japanese runners to really invest time into it and also pick it up. In my current PB, I also do that right now, and I think the top Japanese runners also do that,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
except Sui, because his record was at the time of his record it was not really done yet.
Okay. And then I think Blue Pen is the one you said that who has the new record.
Yeah, he took the record from Leftover, and he had it well until today, a few hours ago.
Okay.
He beat Leftover by 14 seconds, and
That's
a lot of
crazy.
that was test chaos, but also just another really solid run. I wouldn't know exactly by heart how much time or where he saved the remaining time over Leftover, but a part of it was test chaos.
Okay. Um, how much more time do you think people can squeeze out of it? Because it's like, I was thinking that Sui's time was going to be like pretty hard to surpass, but all of a sudden we're almost 40 seconds faster than that, and it
Yeah,
just keeps going. You know.
yeah, exactly. At the moment, Weisse Schaaf, who took the record from Blue Pen with 46.06, he's talking about breaking the 46-minute barrier. So I think we may see a 45XX before the end of the year.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Blue Pen is also still running the game on and off. He also wants to go for 45, I believe.
Okay. Now, DKC 3 doesn't have a lot of like glitches, right? It's mainly just we got to find a way
Right.
to optimize, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot longer of a run than Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2, and it has less tricks, so it's boils down to a lot of small movement optimizations, really optimizing your rolls, your jumps, and everything. It's a different kind of run than the other two games, but it's still a very challenging run in its own way.
Yeah. I'd almost say more so challenging in the fact that it's just pure platforming and stuff. And
Yeah, yeah. The big trick that is in Donkey Kong Country 3 at the moment is Bleak Skip, which is a frame perfect start press to skip the boss fight of World 5, Bleak.
mhm,
And well, Test Chaos is also a big trick that mostly Japanese runners go for.
I
But
get
other
you.
than that, it's 90% movement.
Okay. While we're kind of on the topic, maybe I'll get your opinion on this. Uh, DKC3, like if you look at the history of the first two games, those games are so active all the time, and there's constantly, people playing and records being broken and new things being found. But DKC3 for the longest time was kind of left alone. Was
Yeah,
not really pushed and not really, delved into. Why do you think that is?
and Donkey Kong Country 3 was never as popular as its older brothers, so to speak. It has always been looked down upon a little bit by the community, from what I heard back in the day when Morgs was the primary runner of Donkey Kong Country 3. It was looked looked down upon pretty much by the remainder of the community, from what I heard. But lately, it's been taken more seriously, and there's also more runners who specialize in Donkey Kong Country 3. But I think it's just because it has always been overshadowed by Donkey Kong Country 2 primarily.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds right. Like it's weird because like in a vacuum, I think DK3 is a great game.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
when you compare it to the other two, it's like, oh, I guess it doesn't hold as much of a shine. But
Yeah, it's I think the same. It's still a really solid game, and I think most people do like it. But their immediate response when thinking about Donkey Kong Country 3 is, oh, Donkey Kong Country 2 is the one I prefer.
fair enough. Okay. When did you first get into the community? Like, how much of this stuff did, or how much of this history were you there, like, present for?
I started to arrive in the Discord and check out around mid 2017, and I started running myself in August of 2017.
Okay. So by the time you showed up, DGs and Claude were kind of moved on, right?
Yeah, they did not run Donkey Kong Country 3 very much anymore, and that was right at the peak of Sui's dominance, pretty much.
Okay.
Not long after that, he got the 4630 that stood for several years.
Yeah, tell me about that. So, did he sort of like feel like he was in a good place and put it down, or did he hit a wall, or
I'm not entirely sure why he quit after that. I think he mostly went on to focus on other categories. Maybe he felt like he had optimized the category enough for the time being, or maybe he just didn't feel like running any percent anymore. He has been running Donkey Kong Country 3 consistently since then, but mostly other categories.
Okay,
Maybe he felt like, okay, I'm 51 seconds ahead of number 2 on the leaderboard right now. Maybe it's time to let the others catch up. I don't know for sure.
that's a fair assessment, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, but even still, even after Blue Pen and the other ones came in and beat his times, he never came back to any percent.
He has run it a little bit since then, but I don't think he has done any serious grinding. He's mostly focused on 103 from what I saw, which has been more challenged over the years.
Okay. All right. Um, what's funny is that I wrote all these questions out, and we've kind of already touched on all of them. And I'm like, oh, I
Okay,
guess.
that's
um, yeah, it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know, right? So for
yeah,
me, I'm like,
exactly.
I'm spending so much of my thought process on like the whole Claude versus DG's time, but I'm like, now
That was
talking to you.
yeah, that was before me. The thing is, once I started to get into the community. That was around the time when Sui got his record that stood for like 3 years, if I remember correctly. So not much has happened since I arrived
Mm.
until the last year or two.
Which is very interesting. Do you
Yeah.
think that there's anything with that timing? Like it stood for so long, and do you think do you think it took people long enough to sort of get used to the idea of doing the task chaos and stuff like that before the record would be broken? I mean, I guess granted, leftovers didn't use that, but like why do you think it stood for 3 years?
Yeah, it was just a super daunting time to beat. It was 51 seconds ahead of number two on the leaderboards at the time, and even further ahead of any non-Japanese runners.
Hmm.
So we just felt like this was a time that we could not reasonably achieve. And it was not until Leftover got the 46:21 pretty much out of nowhere when we were like, oh, wait a second, you don't need Test Chaos to get those times. Several people had gotten 46 since that time, but it was just such a daunting task to try and beat it.
Hmm. Okay.
People slowly caught up until Leftover got 46:21, and ever since then, the the thought process has been okay. We can get close to the record now, and it's been the Japanese runners that have really stood up to the task, and they have dominated the category for years at this point. The top five currently is totally Japanese, and Western runners just aren't that close because Western runners don't pick up Task Chaos, at least until now.
Yeah. Do you have a way to contact these J runners?
I think Twitter would be the best option. Not all of them speak English very well.
Okay.
Leftover and Blue Pen barely speak English, I believe.
Okay.
Bashav, the current record holder, speaks it a little bit, and so he speaks it a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, we have someone, a close friend of ours who can at least do text translations. So
Okay,
we
that would
might
be
we might have
perfect.
her to talk to them for us.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I think that would work. Twitter
Okay.
would be your best option then.
Perfect.
I can link you their profiles.
Yeah. Either DM me or put it in the Discord channel there.
Yeah,
Um. Okay. So this is kind of an odd one, and I'm curious if in your research experience you figured any of this stuff out. Um, we want to do a little side piece on Riverside Race
yeah,
because that one it has its own history because it's like one of the only stages with an in-game timer, and I think it was even during your run at Estat that I think Void was saying that it has its own little history, and we wanted to sort of do a little bit of research on that. But I can't find anything for that. Like even as far back as like 2004, people seem to have plenty of times and stuff like that. But I don't know where they're congregating. Do you have any idea?
no, that there has been a miscellaneous category on the wiki. I can link you those leaderboards, and you can go back in time to see what the history of that looked like. But I don't know very much about Riverside Race ILs, to be honest.
Okay. Do you know who might?
Um, I think Conktastic is someone who has held the IL record at several points, and I think Sui has as well. But beyond those two, I wouldn't know.
Okay. It's one of those things where it's like I don't know who would know because it's like 20 years old. You know what I mean? Like it's so
Yeah,
old that or it's probably even older than that, probably closer to 30. The game came out in the 90s, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I can definitely imagine people on message boards back in the days comparing times, but I have not heard anything about that.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'll try and get at your thoughts on a couple of things before we move on.
Yeah,
Um, I was talking to Void, and Void kind of described like there was an era when people would, like they didn't want to do bleak skip, and so it was almost like it was a choice between, do you want to run on English and you would be able to do the fast chaos, but you wouldn't be able to do bleak skip, versus like running on Japanese and you would do bleak skip, but then you have to do a harder chaos. Um, I don't know if that was very prominent, or if that was a thought that you had or that anyone else in the community had at that time, but I'm curious if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've always just done bleak skip from the start. Not even necessarily by choice, but I live in Europe and Japanese cartridges are cheaper to obtain than American ones, so I was always stuck with Japanese cartridge. So I always went for bleak skip.
Fair enough.
And back in the day, I was also like, I think a lot of new runners are like this. I need to go for every strat from the start. Everything that's faster I need to do right now. So I never thought about not doing bleak skip. I just stuck with it. At at the moment, running on U is not very viable anymore if you're going for a real top time, because the time difference is so big and the advantage on chaos has been pretty much nullified by the newer strats on chaos that have been found since, like task chaos or leftover chaos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like Task Chaos is almost as good as.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I believe it's only a couple of seconds apart, and leftover chaos as well is not that much slower than one cycle chaos.
well, there you go. Tell me about Bleak Skip. That's one of those that if you look at all the records, it's like, oh, it's not that hard, but um, it's also, I think it's a big sort of, not point of contention, but it's a big roadblock for a lot of runs. It's a frame perfect trick, and if you miss it, that's like what, 20 seconds lost, but that's a world record con.
Yeah, it sucks. Bleak skip is a frame perfect pause frame. Okay, let me start again. A bleak skip is a frame perfect start press based on an audio cue, and for the longest time we also used to hit bleak at the start of the fight, and as it turns out, that offsets the audio and video, so we would make it even harder for ourselves because the audio cue would not be the same every time. But it's yeah, it's a big round killer. If you are going for PB attempts when you're at a reasonably high level, then you need to get it first try. And even if you do hit it, then you still have two of the hardest worlds in the run to go, and it's a really big roadblock.
Hmm. Okay.
And it being based on an audio cue instead of a visual cue makes it that much harder. Frame perfect tricks based on a visual cue feel easier for some reason.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. I think that. Well, what's interesting is that the human brain, I think, has faster reaction times to sound than it does to sight. But um,
Yeah,
I don't know. There's
and that
definitely,
and at
yeah,
least the way I do it, it's also about anticipating a note in the music. You have to pause at the final note of the death jingle when you get killed by Bleak. So you kind of have to anticipate when that note is going to happen and then press start. And it's really messy. It's not a fun trick.
gotcha. Okay.
And yeah, then even when you do get Bleak skip, then you have the two hardest worlds in the game still to go, and it's you're going to be nervous because you don't get runs past Bleak on good pace very often. So it's just the way that it's positioned in the run, I suppose. It's late enough to where you do not get runs to it that often, but it's not early enough to where you do not have any big run killers afterwards still.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay.
And then last thing on chaos before we move on. So I know that the task chaos thing is like doing a lot of the 2-1 jumps, which is a lot of frame perfect, double frame
Yeah.
perfect trick. What exactly is the leftover chaos? That was something that you
Okay,
mentioned that I could probably go watch, but I'm just curious, like, if you could explain some of the just the general
yeah,
idea.
so to hit chaos earlier, we need to find a way to gain enough height, and 2-1 jumps are one way to get enough height, but Leftover figured out a mechanic that was previously unused in the game that could also be used to gain more height. If a kitty is thrown by Dixie, then he rolls on the ground for a bit, and Dixie can then jump on him. And by using this mechanic and jumping off of Kitty at the exact time to where Chaos is at its lowest point, you can gain enough height to hit Chaos early. And that is used for the first 3 hits in Leftover Chaos.
Okay.
It's still a relatively hard and precise trick, but it's not frame perfect, and it's a much better compromise than Test Chaos for most people.
I get you. Yeah, I mean, it's like what the it's not double frame perfect, so it's like, oh, thank God.
No.
If we miss it, it's like we can just do it again or something.
Yeah, I would say I'm like 70-80% consistent on Leftover Chaos, and if I were to try Test Chaos, it would probably not even be 5%.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
And you said it's only a few seconds slower than Task Chaos, or
Yeah, I believe 8 seconds. It is still a lot of time, but compared to having to do 4 double frame perfect tricks, I think it's a good compromise.
yeah, no kidding. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. I think I'm running out of questions here.
All right.
Um, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think we should definitely talk about in the video?
Um, Let me think if there are any. Yeah, there's another 2-1 jump that every runner goes for. That is at the start of Ropey Rumpus, in the 6th world. We have to do a 2-1 jump to reach a barrel that allows us to skip like a quarter of the stage, and that is a 2-1 jump that everyone goes for. So that one is probably interesting to mention.
Yep. Okay. I think I was aware of this, but because I watched a GDQ run, and I think they talked about it. Um,
Yeah,
okay. Anything else that comes to mind?
yeah, it may be interesting to mention the routing that Leftover has changed in World 7, but it may also be. I'm not sure how interesting it would be.
I could at least touch on it. I
Yeah,
definitely thought like, oh, that's interesting. I wrote, I thought it was interesting to write down. So,
yeah,
so I'll probably bring it up, but I don't know how in depth we'll go into it because
yeah. Fair enough.
things can't get too minute. Otherwise, it's like we're getting left in the soup.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Uh, I think that's all the questions I have.
All right.
Um, so we can wrap this up. And if I have anything else, maybe I could reach out to you for a second thing. But I think we're in a good spot right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out, or if you have any questions, I can always answer them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let me end this recording here.